Thank you, Eugene. We've got a few minutes for questions. I've got one that I'd like to ask, and that is, it's related to development in Asia. And I'm curious your opinions about a model for the rest of the world. And this is perhaps a historically based question, which would get probably back to Jack. But I think perhaps even more importantly, the current work that's happening in Asia, do you see it as a model for the rest of the world? And when I say model, it's perhaps rooted in sustainability, cost, productivity. So I'm curious about your opinions about that. So China, rest of Asia as a model. Do we see it? Do we see it as such, or not?
I wish I had a good answer for that. I think the demand factors that have taken place in China have created the kinds of development that's taken place. Those demand factors don't necessarily exist in other parts of the world. Maybe to a lesser extent in some of the countries in Southeast Asia, maybe somewhat in India, but the demand factors and the rate of growth in the other parts of the world, I don't think, it's a whole different development dynamic in those areas. China is in a world of its own. The factors that determine what's built here don't exist anywhere else. But from a financial point of view, I think development's going to be more equity-driven, less debt-focused. American development had traditionally been very much debt-oriented with as little equity as possible, but in this part of the world, it's usually 50-50.
Maybe I can share with you what's happening in Singapore that the government is looking at. They are looking at productivity, finding ways and means to construct fast, safe, and with minimum manpower. Study trips have been made to Australia because they found that notwithstanding the fact that labor cost is higher over there, but they are much more productive than the workers in Singapore, even in Asia. So what the government is trying to do now is not only legislating the use of BIM, legislating the use of sustainable labels system like Green Mark, legislating constructability and buildability. They are also legislating the amount of manpower we have that can use on site. And now contractors are feeling the crunch because the lesser and lesser manpower is on site. Almost 50% come next year. So they are forced to look at materials, construction methodologies that can cope with such cut in manpower and demands by the developers. So I think if you ask whether Asia should be the role model, I think yes, in a way, because we have our own constraints and our own advantages and disadvantages. But I think on the whole, if I share with you what we're doing in Singapore, we have Singapore. The government is really putting a lot of roadblocks for us to move ahead. And so, in terms of productivity, costs, sustainability, BIM is something that we are all looking at as a total model in construction.
Thanks.
Related to the BIM and the cost analysis, Eugene, I noticed in your presentation the cost analysis looks more like you focused on construction only, but I think for the investors and owners it's interesting to know like what kind of benefit would there be for them in the cost in maintenance and operation of the building by using BIM.
Okay, I apologize I didn't show everything because what I was just showing is a sample on materials that we use in construction. But if you look at whole life costs and life cycle costs, there will be, in this study, they'll be looking at not only on capital costs, but on operational costs and also end of life. So we have worked with some fund managers even, because they know as fund managers they go in with the mind of getting out. So after 5 years they probably will sell the building, right? We will carry out studies together with them on capital costs of the building, maintenance and running costs as well. And I find that fund managers, especially the green funds, are willing to invest a lot more in sustainability and the triple bottom line for ethos, for example, at the start of the project, because they know that after 5 years, or when they want to sell off the building or put it into the market, they probably can get a better capitalization value on the building itself. So we do carry out such studies together with the developers. But the example I showed you on just a brick wall was just a sample of the cost-benefit analysis on how a quantity surveyor can work together with design consultants and the developer, for the matter, to bring better value for the building. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is a question to Mr. Portman. You mentioned in your presentation that you specialize in mixed-use development. And this is a statement we often hear today really in a confusing way. Every other sentence in the literature, mixed use, and I got mixed up. So I would greatly appreciate from your extensive experience in mixed-use development to share with us some meaningful lessons so we clarify this concept of mixed-use development.
Well, mixed use is exactly what the word implies. But every situation, every site, every city, there's economic factors, there's demographic factors, there are growth factors that play into how do you orchestrate the components in such a way that you get the maximum benefit. Mixed use can be, very simple, one block, few apartments, shops, and an office. The larger the scale, the more closely you must study the factors which influence what you do. And in many of our cases, the mixed-use development has been an ongoing process. Occasionally, for example, in Embarcadero Center, we were able to secure the entire 5 city blocks of land in the beginning. So we were able to master plan in the beginning for the whole thing, but build it one block at a time. But what enabled that to happen was that we fixed the land price in the beginning, and we didn't have a land carry. Whereas in Atlanta, we developed block by block because we had to buy the land as we needed it. And that, demand for the use changes over time. Whereas in Embarcadero, even though we did a master plan for the whole thing, we did have the opportunity to change it based on what the market dictated.
There was one. Yep.
Hi, question for Jerry. Hi, this is David Malott from KPF. Yeah, here. So given that you're a Beijing developer, you've had a lot of success in Beijing, and now you're coming to Shanghai. I think you've acquired something like 8 very high-profile sites. How do you see the difference between these 2 cities, and are you going to be adjusting your formula or adjusting the way you do the projects in Shanghai?
You're working for me, right? Are you working for me?
Yes, I am.
Yes, I think so.
Is this a planted question?
No, just read it.
That's why I wanted to know.
Trick question.
Yeah, the answer is yes. The 2 cities are different. And the approach that we are taking from a creative side, it's the same. But in terms of implementation, it's different because, as I said, today I only shared with you 3 Zaha Hadid projects. And if you can see, from design standpoint, they almost not necessarily consider the context because the surroundings really not recognizable. So, but on the other hand, we have other projects, close to 10 projects in Shanghai. They are in heavily dense urban context. And we showed a great deal of respect to the context and creating a relationship. Today, I just don't have time to go through all the other projects.
Hi, this question for John. You know, traditionally, the architect and the developer, they rely on a kind of tension to, you know, when you're working on a great project, the architects and developers come from, you know, different sides, and they try to have this, you know, tension to reach a sort of higher level for the project. So when you are both developer and architect, I'm just curious to know how you manage, you know, this drive.
The tension. You always have this conflict. You know, the developer is charged with building a building within a certain time, within a certain cost. You know, the architect's focus is creating the most beautiful, the most dynamic, building the best advertisement for his future work. So he wants to spend money. The developer doesn't want to spend money. So you have this conflict. So when it's internal, where you're both, you have to decide, where am I going to spend the money? You have a certain amount of money that you have available to you to make a real estate project viable. So you have to control your architect, which is you, to spend the money where it's going to have the greatest impact. I mean, you take a look at Shanghai Center, for example. It's a concrete building. There's no stone on the outside. You know, this was one of the first buildings here, so the budget was very limited. So we had to decide where can we put the finer materials, the better interior fit out, to give it the appearance of quality, even though from a construction point of view, it was a very cheap building. So architects and developers always have this conflict, and just because it's internal to our company doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And my father and I have to act as referee quite often between the two sides.
Thank you. A question for Mr. Portman. My name is Binder. I'm from Brussels, Belgium. In the general literature about mixed-use building, when it comes to parking space, we always read that it's very convenient in mixed use because the parking space are used by the office during the day and may be used at night by the residents or by the hotels. Actually, I'm not really sure it really happens that day. What is your experience with the Shanghai Center or the Peachtree Center where you have lots of hotels, lots of office? Do you benefit of the mixed use to use the parking space on a 24-hour basis instead of a 10 hours a day basis? I hope my question is clear.
It was about parking space, right? Okay. You have a completely different dynamic in Atlanta, Georgia, you do in Shanghai. Shanghai Center is a 24-hour kind of mixed-use development with every type of component in it. Peachtree Center is mainly commercial and hotel. So your parking circumstances are different. But taking Shanghai Center, for example, was one of the earlier projects. When this was built, there weren't that many cars. I mean, I could walk from the site to the Jingjiang Hotel, you know, or even to the Peace Hotel in the Bund and maybe see 20 cars. So today you'll see 20 cars in 5 seconds. You know, there's 50 cars within Shanghai Center, you know, motor court, you know, at 12 o'clock at night. So, but we only had the ability to build 300 parking spaces. So you have, you know, your hotel guests don't really need parking, your residents need it, and there's only a certain area that has parking space where you can come and go. So that's probably not a good example because it's an inadequate parking solution. I'm sure Jerry's dealt with this issue, you know, in a much more, you know, greater detail than I have. Would you like to answer this?
The projects I'm right now working on, most of them do not have residential nor hotel. Mainly office and retail. So, I mean, the concept is viable. It's just a matter of how you use intelligence to design and to operate. I think the operation is probably more challenging than designing.
Let's look at it this way. In Shanghai Center, you got office and housing. The same tenant is in your housing that's in your office. So he's using it 24 hours a day.
Anybody else? One more quick question, if there is one. If not, we're going to take a break. Okay, one more.
I'm Jun Paulo Fox from Makati, Metro Manila. I haven't heard, or maybe I missed it, addressing climate change and disasters, like the Asia Pacific, especially the waterfront, rising sea levels, flooding. I think earthquake and fire, you address it. Because these buildings will last 100 years. Is it a consideration in the design criteria or development criteria? You have rising sea levels, and we have waterfront developments, and land subsidence. Some urban land are going down, and rising sea levels going up. So floods, tsunamis, and so on, especially along waterfronts, including riverfronts.
Maybe I can answer on the Singapore perspective. The government of Singapore does recognize that there's going to be rising sea levels. In fact, twice we had floods in Orchard Road, the downtown, whereby as a main shopping belt of Singapore. So there is a conscious effort to raise the platform level. For example, if you're building a house in the East Coast, you need to raise it by about 1.8 meters straight away. So that's your start platform level. There are considerations as well within the whole island to look at widening of drains, getting a barrage done up properly, desalination of water. But I think the question, best answer to your question is the drive by the government to look into sustainability i.e. greening of buildings. So there is in terms of carbon emissions that will affect climate change at the end of the day, we are looking at not capping, but lowering embodied carbon and also lowering operational carbon. And that's the reason why not only are we looking at green materials, recycling, building productively, less waste, but we're also looking at how we can reduce our carbon footprint within the small island itself and also the construction site itself. So there is a conscious effort by all government ministries, including the man on the street. My daughter is also being taught to make sure she switches off the light after she uses the toilet. So it's one of those things that everybody, including the construction industry, is playing their part for climate change. So there are rules and regulations on like I said, raising the platform level and also building green in this case. Yeah.
Thanks.